Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series that we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 2, and today, we've made it to the finale episode of this season, episode 10, titled The Bear. All right. If you haven't watched the season finale yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an episode summary for The Bear. Season 2, episode 10.
Okay, this is a Hulu summary because I remembered to write it down this time. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Friends and family night at The Bear.
I love that they give us nothing.
Nailed it.
Nothing to work with. We knew that, and the show was like, come on, come watch. You come on.
Yeah, exactly. Nope. It's so good.
It's so great. All right. Let's start off with our episode titles for the season finale. What is yours?
Mine is Walk-In.
Nice. Yeah. That's a whole bit that we are definitely going to talk about in this episode. Okay, my episode title is The Thing.
Well done.
All right. Well, let's dive in. There is much to discuss. A lot happens in this season finale. Tell me your kind of overall thoughts on the season finale, maybe your reactions the first time around, and then especially the second time around. What really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think this is just such another good example of all of the pieces of the bear working together in a really effective way. And I think this time around, I was especially impressed at all of the callbacks to previous episodes and all of those moments of character growth that we've seen, but then also little things throughout this season in particular that we've seen and then finally pay off here. So, Carmi needing to call the fridge guy, that started in episode 2 of this season and then pays off way over here. In a previous episode, them talking about forks, and it seems like a totally normal conversation, and then they run out of forks here. So just being able to pay more attention to some of those things and be able to really see the payoffs in this episode. And it's not just with events or things that happens, but also with characters too. Like we talked a lot about in our previous episode, we get to see how characters respond under stress, and we get to see which ones really excel and rely on the team, and then which ones don't, and what happens with that. So again, we've seen so much character growth over the past season, and then this, I feel like, is that episode where like the rubber meets the road, and we see what happens with that growth. And so a lot of victories, but then there's also some really stressful moments and some real like regression. So I think it's such a good episode, and it also sets up potential conflict for a next season, all within, the successful friends and family night. So all in all, love this episode, so impressed by it, and even more so the second time around.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that you mentioned that was particularly impressive, and I think unique to the way that the bear is so carefully constructed is I feel like there's all these little details that are thread lines throughout the entire season, and they continue to have their own narrative arcs. Like you mentioned forks. The forks get a whole narrative arc through this entire season, from the beginning of the season through some of the scenes with Richie and him cleaning the forks. We see Mikey throwing forks, and now forks are not enough, and they need to get more forks that they then dump into this sink. Like the symbolism of this show is so impressive. The fridge guy is another great example of that. And so all of these small details are all circling the character details as they continue to grow and develop. I think the thing that struck me most about the season finale is just how bittersweet it was, and how sober minded this show is around these really endearing, incredible moments of victory for some of our characters, and kind of this big journey that they've gone on transforming their perspectives and their senses of self. Like, I think Tina and Richie and even Sydney like really leave the season with a lot of big wins. And then the show doesn't just give us like feel good for the sake of feel good. We get some other characters that really have to reckon with some of their own demons and kind of move in a regress direction. And I think that the balance of those things together is what makes this show so great. And it's what keeps those moments of victory and connection between these characters and those endearing feel good moments still feel as good, because it's pretty balanced. It's grounded in reality. Like, we don't get this overly rosy big restaurant opening where everyone makes the right decision and we feel great at the end. Like, they opened the restaurant, they did that thing, which is amazing, and we're so proud of them. But also, personally, for the characters, some of them really step up and step into these new versions of themselves, and others of them really go back to these unhealthy versions of themselves. And I think that balance makes this finale really meaningful, and I think it makes the highs high and the lows low.
And points to something that we have talked about in a previous episode too, in that the characters don't all grow at the same time or on the same trajectory. And we see that even within this episode, as the whole team really is like rising to the occasion. Then you see Carmi really spiraling out and not in a good headspace, which I think is also really interesting given where he was the season finale of the previous season too, where I think it was that episode where that fire happens and he's just standing there staring at it, and it's Tina and Sweeps that have to come in and put it out. And then in this episode, he's stuck in a walk-in and dealing with the cold and still under these extreme circumstances, having a moment, completely freaking out. And so I think that juxtaposition is really interesting too. But I love that this show is so smart to not give us just this overly rosy feel good moment, but there are some real lows in this, like you mentioned, and that just makes it all the more exciting to watch, because really anything can happen and nothing is guaranteed, and we get plenty of that in this episode.
Yeah, and it's such a contrast to the season finale of season one, I would say, where generally, the episode 7, penultimate episode of season one, the whole crew just like are at a low together, and then they all rise to the occasion, and relationships are mended, reconciliation was had, and overall, at the end of that season finale, the crew comes together. Sydney comes back, she's back part of the family. There's relationships that are healed. And we also see in that season finale that Carmi, he overall lands positive growth by the end of that season, where he starts the season off feeling really numb, disconnected, disengaged, suppressing his emotions, and by the end, we get the season finale where he really shares very openly and is vulnerable in that Al-Anon 7-minute monologue sequence. And so I would say season one, net, everybody is in the positive, right? And this one, I really appreciate that. Like we've talked about, the characters all end up in different places, different trajectories. And I think that is really fascinating, that the whole crew is not cohesively grown together. They've collectively done this thing together and accomplished this great thing. But there's now a difference between the like mission that they have to open the restaurant, and it can be separate from the personal growth. And that's often the case in some of our endeavors. Like, we might have accomplished the thing, but it's not all butterflies and rainbows. Like, I think the one that really encapsulates this pretty well for me is like Sydney's whole arc, because she does the thing, she accomplishes her dream, and yet there are these seeds planted around the like intense stress and anxiety that she was under, that she physically threw up after the whole opening night, and wasn't even able to like celebrate with the crew and celebrate with her dad. And there's this kind of like expression on her face that feels really mixed, where she's proud and excited that this happened, but also like the toll that it took on her physically is something that I think the show has now planted seeds for potentially for the next season, because there is something like slightly mixed about that arc for her. And we know that she's a character that is willing to like hustle and grind so hard for the things that she is passionate about. And so there's kind of this question of like, how much is Sydney going to push herself to, and where will she find healthier balance, better balance? And so in a lot of ways, her and Carmi are very similar, like we've talked about a ton throughout this season. But I think especially we're starting to see their tendencies be pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think that's such a fun, maybe isn't the right word, but call back to the previous episode where when Marcus shoots his shot, she when her response to what are you doing after is probably puking 40 times. And we see that there was actually some truth to that she knew after all of this, I'm probably going to be barfing. And so I think that again is just one of those like little details that if you're paying attention, it recontextualizes her answer. Like she wasn't just being funny, but this is something that she was aware of within herself. And then, seeing her celebrating the the successful
Yeah.
friends and family night by puking behind a dumpster.
Mm.
But I also love that in that moment you see Emmanuel meeting her and like caring for her and encouraging her and just being there for her even though she is puking behind a dumpster. So I think just that continued care that they show for each other, because all throughout the episode she wanted to make sure that her dad was taken care of, and you see Richie and Fack going above and beyond to make sure that he's okay. And then at the end of the episode, you see her dad showing that same level of care and encouragement for her too. So I think that is such a heartwarming relationship, and I really hope that we get to see more of that in season 3.
Yeah, there's some really great moments between her and her father, and I think that relationship with her father has been kind of in a key detail throughout Sydney's story. And I think it's one of the things that we learn about her first when we meet her in season 1, and the significance of his affection, his approval, all of that she is expressed. I think we're getting to see really be satisfied finally for her, and that's exciting. And when he says, like the food, it was incredible. I felt that too. I'm like, oh, it was incredible. I'm so glad. Like just the satisfaction of hearing him understand and be proud of the things that she's created is just really heartwarming. So there's another aspect about Sid in this episode that I think is really great, which is such a contrast to the way that she reacts in episode 7 of season 1, where when the stress and the anxiety come, she kind of just quits. She just is like, I'm out of here. And I love seeing that even when things got really stressful in the kitchen and Carmi's like raising his voice and yelling at her, she holds her cool and remains calm and continues to lean in and stay engaged. And I think that is also growth for her, because she could have walked out, and we've seen her walk out, but she has grown, and her stability in her ability to manage her emotions has also grown, that she can stay and manage this tough situation where they're down one chef, Carmi's out, and who's going to make the food, and I think it's really cool to see that growth in her.
Well, and what I really appreciated about this episode is there's that one moment where you just see the tickets just coming in, a flood of tickets. And in the previous season, we know what happened when those tickets went crazy, and Carmi completely lost it and was trying to pivot and was just not okay, and then that led to Sydney walking out. And so it's this moment of, oh, we've been in this situation before and we saw how Carmi handled it. Okay, Sid, how are you going to handle it? And I think it points back to that larger theme that we've been seeing all throughout the show of are you going to rely on your team, or are you going to try and do it all yourself? And Sydney is able to rely on the team. And I love that moment with Richie, because he is
Yes.
so calm,
Yes.
and he's just like, okay, what are we going to do?
Mhm.
And he gives Sydney a moment to think, and she's trying to like replace everybody, and then he steps up and he says, I can do it. And I loved that moment, because it's a moment of character growth for Sydney, but it also shows that repair that Richie and Sydney's relationship has gone through over the past season. It's such a satisfying and heartwarming moment in the middle of such a stressful part of the show. It's just great.
Yeah, we've come a long way from getting stabbed in the butt, you know? Yes. Uh, man, let's talk about Richie. My dude is thriving. I love how he remains so calm. I mean, you know, we've seen him be the super brash and aggressive dude through so much of season one and the first half of this season. And in this episode, he remains so cool, calm, and collected. What's and on top of that, I think it was really cool to see the way that, in only the way that Richie's charisma can, he can encourage the team while he's like yelling out all of the orders and instructions. Like, he adds in his Richie flair, and it really creates this environment that is positive, and it makes people feel a little bit more relaxed. He makes it fun. I love that moment where he's calling out the orders and he's like, all right, who's ready to party now, and we're gonna keep driving, and then we're gonna smoke our cigarettes afterwards. It's he is using his strengths and his ability to create positive energy and make people laugh and make them feel at ease, and he's bringing that into this very stressful 5-minute sprint that they're doing. And I just love seeing him operate in that. And the other little bit that I love that the show included is that when he allows Fact to go and run front of house because he's now stepped into this new role, I appreciate that Fact's scared and he doesn't know what to do. But Richie says, I don't know how to do this either, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to step in, we're going to lean in, and kind of them both being able to acknowledge, like, hey, this is kind of hard and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try. And I love that they have that moment as well. And so it's not Richie, shying away from these things that he doesn't feel competent to do, but he knows that the team needs it and he's willing to step in and try and figure it out.
It's so good. Go Richie. And just such a satisfying, I don't know, part of his arc, because we saw him in his episode, watching how that expo was done, and just you can tell that he soaked in every single thing from that experience in that restaurant. And then you see the payoffs of that here, them passing notes to each other and the way that they go above and beyond for certain people, and then even the way that they innovate how he's running expo. I love that the episode starts with the camera just focused on Sydney as she's reading out the tickets. It's only basically her face, and you can see some of the chefs behind her, but she's kind of isolated and separate from the rest of the kitchen. But then when Richie takes over, both he and Sydney decide, no, we have to change how this is working. And so they turn it around so that Richie is then facing the kitchen and can better communicate with everybody. And so I love those little moments of innovation where they're like, hey, this isn't working, we need to change this. And you see how quick they are to pivot and how much they now trust each other to make those decisions and make those changes so that their kitchen runs better. It's one of those moments where, like, I felt so proud of them during
Yes.
this episode, because you can just see their immense growth from the beginning, and how they are finally working together as a team, finally just like meshing and gelling and letting people run in their lane and lean on their strengths in a way that we really haven't seen to this degree before.
Yeah, no, it's so good. And there's this, I love this little line where like Sydney is clearly like stressed out and freaking out, and Richie just says, I got you, chef. And I don't know, when you're in that like really stressful situation and that state of panic, just hearing that someone's got your back, even they don't even, he hasn't even like volunteered to step in at this point yet, but he's just saying, I got you, chef. We're going to figure it out. I'm behind you. We're a team. Like that, the power of those words, I think, is really fascinating. And I think you can see the way that Sydney's like feeling the weight of that. And immediately afterwards, she's like, all right, Richie, drive. And I love that also, like the cinematography and the music cut in that little segment is so resonant of what we saw in his episode where he was observing and kind of uh, oogling at the person that was driving and running those orders in his kitchen that he was interning at. And it's kind of what you're saying in that episode of like he gets to be the main character energy of this movie that he's the hero in. And it's cool to see that the way that the music shifts, there's a punch in shot of him and we get to see him just thriving. And I love the way that the cinematography makes that a fun moment and an exciting, thrilling moment for him that we get to kind of get an experience of, even though we're not there.
And I love that that is contrasted with the beginning of the episode, which is this really fun, extended, like continuous take as people are floating from back of house to front of house, and you see how both sides are operating so differently, but they're also operating in tandem, and there's just this fluidity to that opening section where everything is flowing, everything is all right, we're doing our thing. And then once everything goes wrong, then it's edited in such a way that it's just a bunch of like quick cuts and the camera is constantly moving, and you're going from back and forth and back and forth, and the music changes. And then when Richie drives, then like Pearl Jam comes in and we're ready to rock, let's go. So I love the way those contrasts really play off of each other and show the character's state of mind as the episode is progressing and as things start to go wrong. It helps to create that stress and that tension just through these more technical elements of this episode. It's so brilliant the way that they did this.
Yeah, I feel like we often talk about and focus a lot on the characters and the writing and whatnot, but the cinematography and the technical like choreography, the blocking of those shots, the way that there's just almost the sound of like going between worlds or time travel ish thing that happens when you like go through the door of the kitchen between front of house and the kitchen that feels like you're like and you're like in a different world, and then when you go back into the kitchen there's that sound effect that happens that I thought was just so cool every time it happens. And indeed the world of the front of house and the ambiance, the vibe, the mode that you are in as a server too is also so different when you're in front of house versus when you're in the back. You can be yelling out expletives and the vibe is just different, and the way that you carry yourself is different because one is front facing, customer facing, and the other is back with your crew. So I love the way that there's this, fun little sound effect that they kind of wove in there as well to showcase that there's these two different worlds that are existing and supporting each other, but are totally different in nature.
The other sound choices that I really love in this episode, one of them is in the beginning, when Sydney's in her own little world calling out orders. You can hear Marcus in the background yelling and asking for all days on cannolis. And I think there's a couple of other things, like he is constantly needing more information as she's just like reading out orders. And you can hear all of the sounds in the kitchen, and it's kind of hard to hear Marcus, but you can hear him if you really pay attention. So I think that that's such a smart way of showing us how isolated and in the zone Sydney was without really paying attention to what was going on around her. And then the other little sound detail that they include in the kitchen is the constant beeping of the timers, especially when Carmi starts to lose his absolute mind about the fishes. You can hear this beeping in the background that's just constantly adding chaos and noise and stress going on. But I think it's also reminiscent of the Christmas episode wherein
Mhm.
Donna's kitchen, when she's freaking out, there's these constant like zoom ins on kitchen timers that are going off all the time, and it almost feels like this like siren or this like alarm bell going off. And I feel like that's what they replicated in this episode of these timers are constantly going on, everything is beeping, and your alarm bells are on and you're on alert because something is wrong. And I think that that was again such an effective choice in getting us into the mind of this character who, even before he gets locked into the walk-in, is already freaking out.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about Carmi, shall we? The I think
Oh, Carmi.
Oh, Carmi. Okay, what really is a sucker punch with Carmi's arc within this episode is that we see this moment of growth in him in the beginning, was it 20 minutes of the episode with Sydney and him, where they start kind of getting heated and start yelling at each other. We see that he's starting to get stressed, but they back off, and together they have this moment of like, okay, this is growth. This is good. We are managing conflict in a really healthy way. He says, I'm sorry. Like, and they both calm down, So you're like, all right, here we go. Some great growth, some great character moments. And then it kind of goes downhill after he gets locked into the fridge. But I thought it was just like really fascinating pacing and kind of like managing of our emotions to for the show to give us this picture of no, like Carmi has grown in a lot of ways. In some other ways, he's gonna regress later that we see. But that teaser of there's these really great things that truly have happened in Carmi in the way that he operates, that he's really trying, and he's not necessarily the same Carmi that we saw at the beginning of season one. He leans into that a little bit towards the end of this episode when he begins to like spiral and go down that mode of like self-loathing and feeling like he is not worthy of these good things. But there's these moments of growth that we get at the beginning that I think just feel very significant because he doesn't fall apart from the beginning of the episode. It really comes in the second half, and we get these really great wins for him in the first half.
And I think that is what makes his spiral even more tragic,
Yeah.
is because we've seen him win. And I think for me, what makes that whole thing just extra tragic is I I guess Carmi doesn't really know how to be a leader. Like, I don't know if I'm in his spot and I've worked so hard for this and I've worked to raise up this team, and I can't help, and they still succeed, they still come together as a team and get it done. I I would be
Yeah.
celebrating that,
Yeah.
like it's just, to me, like especially watching it a second time, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
And he's so caught up in his brain that he can't even see that. And there's a little bit of that moment when Tina is having a heart to heart with him through the walk-in door,
Yeah.
where he's saying all of these things, and she's listening to him, but then she tries to redirect him, but he just can't. He is stuck in this really unhealthy spiral. And I think that's what makes this episode so tragic for him, is he can't see the win for what it is because he is so caught up in himself. And that's such a human thing too, like when we just get into our own brains and can't get out of the spiral. So it's so relatable, but also I want to shake him because I'm like, Carmi, no, this was a win. Like, why can't you see this? Why can't you celebrate your team doing this? Man, it's so tragic, especially for this character that we've seen grow and we're really rooting for. And then he gets stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the key to all of this that he keeps mentioning again and again is he feels so guilty and responsible for not calling the fridge guy, and this being
Mm-hmm.
what happens as a result. And so he like bears the entire burden of that responsibility on himself, and then basically also multiplies that out into all of the other ways that he's felt like he's failed his team. And so, like you're mentioning, he can't see his team winning because he's so focused on the fact that he's failed them, and him carrying the weight and the guilt and the shame associated with all of that then triggers all of that like self-loathing that you see him begin to spiral into, where he goes from I should have called the fridge guy and I didn't, and I dropped the ball on that. I did a oopsie, all the way to the end of that spiral, which is I don't deserve good things. I don't deserve it. And I think that the inclusion of the scene where Mama shows up and Donna expresses like a near identical feeling of I don't deserve to see them do this great thing. I'm gonna hurt it. I'm gonna taint it. And I think there's these really interesting echoes between the way that Donna feels about herself and what she believes she deserves, and the way that Carmi spirals in a kind of a very like similar way. They're different somewhat in nature and how it manifests, but I think that the root of it is very similar. And I think that echoing is really fascinating because I think that was one of the big questions that we had at the end of the previous episode is mom going to show up? Is she not going to show up? And the show kind of does this really interesting like middle thing where she shows up, but like Sugar doesn't know, and Pete's the one that has to bear the responsibility of knowing that she's come, but then all of this emotional conversation that they have, right? But I think it's fascinating because it feels so fitting to then shed light on Carmi's state and him growing up in this environment and observing that, and that being something that he struggles with. So I think they fight very similar demons.
Yeah, that's so good. And I also love that it ties back to uh it was in season 1, I think. Gosh, they all blur together after a while, but that monologue where Carmi does talk about amusement or enjoyment,
Yeah.
and he doesn't know how to have those things. And then we've seen throughout this season how he's having those moments of amusement. He's allowing himself to enjoy things. And it's like, yay, that's so much growth for you, Carmi. And then he learns the wrong lesson while stuck in the walk in of, I don't need to provide amusement or enjoyment. I don't need to receive amusement or enjoyment. And it's just, no, Carmi, that's not the lesson here. No, don't learn this. This is wrong. Going back to your old ways is not the way to go. But he can't see that. And I do love how they included Donna in this episode, because you see how both Sugar and Carmi are affected by her, and in some ways it seems like Sugar is more affected by Donna, because the first thing she says to Pete is, do you think mom will like it? And every time she comes back out to Pete, she's asking about, hey, do you think she'll show up? What do you think? Like, she is so focused on her mom. But then in that moment with Carmi, you realize, like, oh, he is also really affected by Donna, but he probably doesn't realize it. And you see that in his thinking and how he's processing through things. So it's interesting that Donna is only there for a second, but you can feel her presence throughout the episode, which is really smart of the show to do.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I feel like it showcases the power of the narratives that we believe about ourselves, about our place in the world, about what we are worthy of or not. Because what's fascinating about the whole set piece of him getting stuck in the walk-in is that he can't really hear anybody else but his own voice. You know, like I think people, Tina tries to talk to him, Richie tries to talk to him, but like for generally, like no one is there to like reframe that narrative for him, to like talk him off the ledge that he is spiraling in. And so he's isolated, he's alone, and so it's easier for his thoughts to spiral down this really unhealthy direction, and him concluding all of the wrong lessons and all of that kind of stuff. And it is so accurate to the way that like when we are isolated and we are not in relationship with people, that it's potentially easier for our thoughts to go down these narratives that are not true. And there's no one there to be like, hey, before you go down that path, let me speak something else over you. Let me show you other parts of how you were key to this journey. And yes, you should have called the fridge guy. It's okay. You know what I mean? There's no one there to like grab onto his hands as he's like running down this really unhealthy direction, because he's by himself. And I thought that I mean, it's like poetically really ironic because he was the one that was supposed to call the fridge guy, and so he's the one that gets stuck in there. Like that kind of is ironic in all of the ways that the universe has a funny sense of humor, but also just from a like a narrative perspective, it helps usher in the ability for his thoughts to spiral because no one else is there to talk him down from that ledge. And I think metaphorically, when we as human beings are isolated, it's so much easier for us to like run in a healthy direction. And I think one of the themes of the show that we've talked about a ton is just the power of community, the power of relationships, being part of a team, being known and being understood by other people, and then seeing other people and how Kiwi need each other. And you see the way that like Carmi is isolated, and how that manifests in him.
And I think that's such an interesting parallel because throughout this season, we've also seen Ibra isolate, separate himself from
Yeah,
community.
good point.
We don't know exactly what was going on in his head, but we know that it was a lot of shame and insecurity and fear and all of those things, things that Carmi is also dealing with. And then we've seen Ibra come back and be welcomed. And so I think that is really interesting because now we've just seen Carmi isolate just like Ibra had been. And I think that sets up a really interesting trajectory for Carmi. How is he going to respond in season 3? And where is season 3 going to start on this
Yeah,
journey too? Like,
yeah.
and how is Carmi going to respond to these lessons that he's learned in the walk-in? Is he going to be able to come back like Ibra did and be welcomed back into community, or is he going to continue to further isolate, which I think is his MO? So again, we'll see. And the show has kind of given us that cliffhanger, almost like it's not a cliffhanger, but you want to know what happens next with him.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And you see the way that his team and his family wants to be there for him. You know what I mean? Like you see Tina go and check in on Carmi, which is so sweet. And I love that little moment where um, Carmi asks Tina, "Are you still there?" And she just says, "Always, Jeffrey, always." And it just feels so significant. Like she says that of like logistically, like, yes, I'm still here, but just the always part of it, like just the way that is written to mean so much more than just, hey, are you still outside the fridge door? But no, like at a larger level, like, I'm always here for you, Carmi. It's just, it's so significant and meaningful. And then you even get to see the way that Richie, okay, the whole Richie Carmi fight, it's not great. Not great at all. They're really going for the jugular with each other. But by the end of that fight, there's like a few seconds where Richie's just yelling, I love you know, and it feels like such a callback to the Christmas episode where Sugar says the same thing to Mikey. And you can see that the way that Carmi and Mikey are dealing with these similar things of worth and self-worth and esteem, their own self-esteem and their own demons, and the way that the power of those words and just saying we are here for you, you are loved, you are safe, just are significant. So I love the ways that like the show shows that like his family is there for him. It's just whether Carmi will allow the space and the openness for him to receive that. And for right now, he's choosing not to, but we will see what comes next.
Yes, much to look forward to because it's all of Carmi's relationships, really. Like I feel like obviously like his response to Claire is a big part of it, but it's not just Claire.
Yeah.
It's all of his relationships and how is he going to respond? And I don't know, we will see.
Yep. Yep. How will he rebuild from here? Yep. Um, other significant parts of this finale?
I mean, can we talk about Marcus?
Yes. Really great Marcus moments. I mean, first of all, let's start from the beginning. I don't think we've seen Marcus heated before. And so that was new. That was spicy. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I appreciate that we know that it is he is there's an emotional reaction. It's not just him getting frustrated that he's not being heard. It's Sydney specifically being the one that is not hearing him. And the context and the tee up for that with him asking her out and them kind of like glossing over it and weaseling their way out of that conversation. I think all of that is contributing obviously to his frustration and the way he kind of lashes out a little bit. But I love that later on in the episode, we see that he comes to Sydney. He's proactive about being like, hey, should we talk about this? And she deflects. She's like, no, what are you talking about? But I love that he is proactive to drive that reconciliation and that clarity together with her. And he takes the initiative. It just is so great. I love this character.
Well, and he opens with that, but then he closes with, "Hey, Josh is doing drugs outside. Can I fire him?" Like, so I love that he was ready to have an emotional conversation if needed, but also he had this moment of absolute absurdity and levity ready to go in his back pocket.
I love also that he's in the yard, runs in to be like, hold on, I think I need to ask if I can fire you or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got to check.
I think I gotta check. And Sydney's like, yes. And he's like, okay, cool. Scurries back to the backyard to be like, I think you're fired. It's so endearing. It's so sweet. It's very of Marcus to not react and just be like, okay, let me go check really quickly. I think I can, but let me go check.
Yeah, it's so great. And then
And
and
then,
then we see that Luca sent him the every second counts sign.
yes.
So the bear also has one of those, which is just so heartwarming and really fun because you see Marcus get that package. I think it was 2 episodes
Yeah.
ago when he's talking with Carmi and Sydney. You see a package delivered, but you don't know what's in it. And then he finally opens it here, which is such a satisfying payoff. And I think connects back to that other theme of time that we've seen all throughout the season, but specifically in this episode, because we saw them using every single second during those 5 minutes and they succeeded. So just all of these little nods and the way that these themes are just so subtly woven throughout the season is just exceptional. It's so fun to pick up these little threads that are just constantly present in this show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. The other really great one was the chocolate banana scene with Richie sending that over to
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Jimmy's table, and I thought that just warmed my little heart so much. And I think another example. I mean, Richie. I would say Richie's one of the characters that really comes out on top at the end of the season, and I think he is very
Mm-hmm.
clearly taking what he's learned and observed and knows to be significant in creating these moments for people and really leaning into that. And I love that little scene too. And the way that Uncle Jimmy is kind of like his breath is taken away as well. And he is shocked. And Uncle Jimmy is like, he's seen a lot of things. He's been through a lot of life. And so to take his breath away,
Mm-hmm.
quite something, quite an accomplishment.
Well, and that's such like a cherry on top of everything else you've seen Richie and Fack and Gary do throughout the entire episode. You see Sydney's dad who doesn't drink, and when he's offered like bottle service, it's soda. And then
Right? Like
even
it's
when
so
like
hard.
Richie is yeah, it's so cute. And then like when Richie is expoing, he acknowledges that Sydney's dad doesn't do cherries, and so he like calls that out. He calls out another allergy or something. Like it's just this constant awareness of the diners at the restaurant that Richie has shown for the entire episode, and the way that he has helped create that culture of care within all of the servers is just so sweet to see. Like he fully gets it. He's not just in the environment where everybody's doing it, so like he just rides that wave, but here he is actively creating that culture. And that's so heartwarming to see him use um, that gregarious, like magnetic part of his personality to set the culture in such a positive way. So Richie, man, it's a whole new Richie by the end of this season, and we just love to see it.
I love it. Yes. I'm just so proud of this character because I think that he starts off this season he starts off the season so low and questioning his purpose and his identity and all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting to see the way that like him and Carmi almost went opposite directions. You know, like at the beginning of the season, Carmi is the one to be like, "Hey, no, I got you. We're gonna figure this out. I'm not gonna drop you, but we're in this together." And the roles have kind of switched where Richie's found his purpose. And now I'm just fascinated to see the way that he maybe can help Carmi walk through this next season. And you he doesn't handle that fight with Carmi through the fridge door in the best way, but you see that the care is there. Like when Claire walks out, you can see Richie just genuinely cares to see his cousin, you know, not squander this amazing opportunity, this love that he's found. And that's kind of why he has that whole fight and that whole conversation with Carmi to be like, come on, dude, like don't mess it up. Like, what did you say to her? But you just see how much he cares, and it's really cool to see the way that these two dudes that are so different in personality can really build each other up and help call each other up into better things. And I love seeing their trajectories kind of go in many different directions at different times.
They're a great pair. And I think that we see just how different they are and how much they need each other in this episode, even if they don't always see that. I feel like they see that they need each other at different times, which is always really fun and exciting, and makes for some interesting scenes between those two. But yeah, they are always such a joy to watch those two. And the other character that I really loved seeing with Richie in this episode is Sugar, because like we had talked
Mm.
about before, you know, they had a very
Mm-hmm.
contentious
Mm-hmm.
relationship for most of this season. And then, you know, Richie apologized a couple of episodes ago, and now we see them in this episode just working so well together. And we see how both of them are able to like float in and out of different circumstances, able to respond to different things, and they're just playing off of each other and supporting each other and supporting the team as a whole. So it's really cool to see these two who go about things so differently, still able to come together and see each other's strengths and celebrate each other's strengths and just be a good support. So they're a good pair too, which I wouldn't have said at the beginning of this season.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and you're right because those moments feel really satisfying because they've earned it. You know, they've done the hard work to. I mean, they've fought with each other, they've been at each other's throats, but they've also done the hard parts to be vulnerable and apologize and rebuild, and so that feels earned, which is really exciting because we know where they've been. But it's not like all of a sudden the next few episodes and they're good now. No, like we've seen them really lean in and try and put in the effort together. And so it feels satisfying because we've also seen them work for it and really invest in that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like we've seen that for all the characters too, and that is what makes their growth so exciting, and then their regression so tragic is because we've seen them over time, all of them, putting in the work in various ways to grow and change and whatever it looks like in their particular context. So the way that this show is able to handle so many characters growing and changing all at once is really impressive, especially because the episodes are short. And yet we've been able to really get to know these characters and see them put in that work. And so when they do have this victory tonight, it's so satisfying because we know where they've come from, we know what they've been through, and then for most of them to come out on top, it feels like such a rewarding culmination of these two seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Any other big things that we wanted to mention with this finale before we give out some awards?
I don't think so. I think we hit
Okay,
most of them.
cool.
I don't know. My notes are so long.
Same.
I don't even know what we forgot.
Yep. Same. um, I there's two little calls that I want to make. One is I was glad to see Peter play an interesting role in this episode when he has the whole conversation with Donna, and I was just like, Pete, like, is he gonna? Because we've seen him just like drop the ball and to like not read the room at all in so many other scenes throughout the season 1 and season 2, where he just like says the wrong thing or brings the wrong dish at the wrong party. And I was wondering if he would be responsible for another big emotional thing. And I love that he honors Donna's request, and is looking to help like uh, Sugar understand, and without explicitly sharing what has happened and the conversations that he had, but just to say like she really like I would cut her some slack for this one for not showing up. And I love that little sweet Peter moment because he usually is the butt of a lot of jokes on the show, and it's cool to see him be the one to have spotted Donna and for him to get to play that role. It's really neat. And then my other little call out is the seven dishes dish. I don't know if they talked about it in a previous episode. They might have, and I might have just missed it. But I just love how it's this like beautiful modern like white crisp plate with like seven little like dollops of different types of seafood, and just the contrast between that and the seven dishes whole debacle from one of the earlier episodes and the Christmas episode, I think was just kind of a cool little like contrast, but also I think showcases what we've seen throughout the show in the past of how much dishes and these artistic creations are so personal. Like all of the desserts are personal. The cannoli that Carmi creates is personal, and the seven dishes dish, like they just put so much heart into it. And I think the show in general has loved and honored the culinary arts, and it's cool to see the way that they continue to do that through these little details as well. So I just loved that one of the dishes on the menu was called seven fishes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole show is so interconnected with each other, and I love that, especially an episode like this, you can see all of the callbacks to the previous episodes, and just that intentionality of the writing. You know, that Seven Fishes episode wasn't just there so that we see a crazy family gathering. Like obviously it's there for that, but it's so much more, and you learn so much about Carmi in that too. And it was so impactful to him that they made it a dish on the menu. And again, this moment with his mom, like that was something that she created. Presumably every year she would do seven fishes, I'm just assuming. And so what a way for him to honor her. And yet she doesn't come into the
Yes,
restaurant and she doesn't
I know.
experience that. So
Yeah.
it's just so many layers to this
Mm-hmm.
show. It makes it so interesting and fun to unpack each episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Which just it feels like such a loss because you're like, Donna, just go in there and see how much that family tradition meant to your kids. Because I think it was neat because in that Christmas episode, she keeps saying like, no one cares about this. Like I'm the only one that does. No, this is not even important to anybody. And to see her children honor her in that way, it's really, really neat. Yeah, so cool. Okay, let's give out some awards, shall we? The first category is Top Chef. Who is getting this award?
I want to give this to everyone except for Carmi and Josh.
Amazing. Yeah.
Because,
Everyone
like,
does.
everyone else deserves
Yes.
it. Like,
Yes. Very much so. And Josh is just being chaotic in the backyard.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that he doesn't like leave entirely too, but he's like in the backyard doing his having his grand old time. Like just leave entirely, leave the premises, disappear. But no,
Mm-hmm.
he was found. He was discovered. playing a little hide and go seek.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, hiding very badly.
Very
So,
badly. Yes. Um, I'm giving this award to one of my favorite characters, Richie, for just stepping up in all of the ways, both logistically, emotionally for everybody, staying calm, cool, and collected, creating positive energy. I'm just so proud of this character.
oh, he does a great job in this
Yeah.
episode. He kills it. Way to go, Richie. We're proud of you.
I was grinning ear to ear in his whole scene where he's driving that 5 minute sprint. So good. Okay, the next category is achievement in chaos. Who is getting this award? Or what moment or thing, item, all of the above.
I want to give this to Carmi for learning all the wrong lessons while stuck in the walk-in.
Yeah, literally. Like yelling at the screen, like, no, that's the wrong conclusion. Please. My choice is also for Carmi, but it's for him constantly pounding on the fridge door. Like it is so unhelpful.
Yep.
And for anyone that's been in stressful situations, like anything like that just fuels your stress level that much more. He just needed to calm down and be quiet and just let the team run it. But no, instead, I just love that there's so many little scenes too where people are having conversations and you can just hear him yelling and pounding faintly in the background as everything else is swirling around them. It's some great sound editing too.
Well, and what kind of surprises me, but also impresses me about that is nobody yells at him to knock it off. You know, like,
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been probably my MO after a while of hearing the constant banging is I'd be like, shut up, we're trying to work.
Yep.
Like, and nobody does that. And so I wonder if it's that, I mean, probably that tunnel vision of like, we have to get this done, but also maybe that EQ of like, okay, if you yell at him right now, you're probably going to make it worse. So just let him be and let him stew and just do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. The next category is spiciest line. Who's getting this award for what line did they give?
I want to give it to Sugar for when she says to Carmi, I'm going to buy you a calculator.
Yes, I have the same one.
Nice. Yes.
It was great. Again, well set up and paid off in this episode because we see throughout so many episodes that he literally is so bad with numbers and cannot count and do mental math. So that felt just like locked and loaded, and she delivers it. Okay, well, looking ahead, I suppose we can talk about just our musings and conjectures about what will unfold in season 3 and maybe just what you want to see because we don't know. The Bear's going to do anything that it wants. But is there anything that you're hoping to see in the next season?
Okay, well, we'll get to that, but I am also preemptively upset because of how this episode ends with all of the missed calls on Marcus's phone. And it's so sad and tragic because this character, obviously we love Marcus, he's great, and has just been part of this team, doing so much, firing a wayward employee, you know, killing it on desserts, doing all the things, and then for him to have missed all of those calls from his mom's nurse, and we know what that means. And so I am already heartbroken and already upset, and I'm mad at the Bear for this particular choice, even though it's the right choice. I'm still upset about it, so I am bringing my upsetness into season 3 with me.
Yes, as we should, because one of the things that I kept mentioning throughout our looking ahead sections of our episodes throughout the season is like, why start the season with Marcus in the hospital and for a long sequence, you know? And it's just the show is really bookending with that as well. And I think it's a really fascinating, like, larger point that the show seems to be interested in and captivated by around the like really gray areas between our professional lives, our passions, our ambitions, and then also the very real like relationships and family and our personal investments that we have with the people that we love most, and how sometimes it's hard to juggle all those things together. And I feel like that is really relatable. We see Carmi figure out and try to balance all of that with this new relationship with Claire and all of his other ambitions with opening a restaurant. And now I think with Marcus as well, just the reality of chasing your dreams and some of the sacrifices and challenges along the way, I really love. It reminds me a lot of La La Land with Damien Chazelle, and kind of that theme that Damien Chazelle is fascinated in his films around the things that we do to go after the things that we love and the sacrifices made along the way. And I love that this show is also very grounded in that as well. And your preemptive upsetness is totally valid as we take it into season 3. Oh, they just leave us on such a like gut punch, because it comes right after this really great high of like they did this thing that they were
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
excited for and working hard for. And life hits, reality hits. It's always going to be challenging. And amongst your biggest wins, there's also things that will also happen as well. So, okay, other things
Mm-hmm.
that you want to take into season 3, in addition to your preemptive upsetness?
Yes. I think one of my biggest questions about season 3 is, and we already talked about it a little bit, but like, where is season 3 going to start?
Yep.
I'm very curious about that choice, because I think that choice will also help drive what this season is going to be about,
Yep.
too. Is it going to be the immediate fallout from this night, or is it going to be a little bit after, once the restaurant is maybe up and running? And then I think another question that I have is, what is going to be the big goal
Yep.
for the bear
That was
in
my
season
question
3?
too.
You know, this season it was all about like getting the restaurant up, and there are all of these obstacles to get there, and then they were able to do friends and family, so they're ready to open. But what is going to be the goal that this team is working toward in season 3? Is it going to be going after a star? Is it going to be something maybe a little bit smaller? So I think that that's also going to be an interesting thing to be looking out for. What is driving these characters in season 3?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Those were kind of my 2 main bullets. Was where will season 3 pick up is one of my bullets, and then what are we gonna do next? Like what? Because I think that will be fascinating too, because it is the backdrop for all of these character moments. Like how will the characters grow? But the characters are often growing in response to the stimulants in their environment and the things that are creating conversations, stress, tension, victory. Like all of those things are ushered in through the course of something they're going to do together. And so figuring out what that next thing is will be fascinating. I wonder, I feel like there's these like open threads that we're still going to, explore, pick up on with Carmi. Obviously, I think there's some things with Sydney that the show's seeding a little bit, which will be interesting. And then obviously I think there's going to be a lot with Marcus and family and whatnot. I don't know. I think just if they're going to have such an intentional shot of his phone with those missed calls, surely the show is great at harvesting the things that it plants. So I feel like there's going to be something there with Marcus's character that he's really going to grow and develop in, which is so interesting because I kept wondering and waiting for that in this season, because it felt like they've really laid the foundation for it at the beginning of this season. But we see him grow in a lot of ways, but I think that ironically, the show's playing the long game. You know what I mean? I think a lot of that growth and payoff and him really having to reckon with these big things may come even later than I expected. So it's just neat to see the way that the show is so planful about its longer arcs instead of giving us the instant like gratification of here's a seed and it's a flower now. No, sometimes we have to till and watch them grow slowly. I mean, we could say the same with Richie too. Like, there's so much that was seeded in season 1 that really started to gain momentum in season 2, and finally we get the full flower that is Richie by the end of this season. So the kind of the longer storytelling arcs of the show is really fun and exciting. I think there's some cool stuff with Fact too that we might explore. So, man, there's so much. There's so much, but I think what's really neat is that we as the viewers are so invested in these people that I'm like, I don't even care what we do. I just want to see what next phase of life are these characters going to go through, and we just get to be along the journey with them.
And I think it's interesting that the show has been renewed for season 3 and season 4. And so I wonder how that will influence the writing of these 2 seasons, because like you said, the show is so smart in delaying that gratification and not paying things off right away. So are we going to see even more things, maybe not even pay off in season 3, but pay off in season 4? And we don't know. We're not going to know until we watch, but those are just some fun things to look out for, and knowing that it has been renewed for 2 more seasons, that probably gives the writers a little bit more room to play, and giving them opportunities to explore more things over the long run, rather than having to try and cram so much into one season.
Yeah, and then those payoffs just feel so satisfying because we've been waiting and tilling the land to get to that point where we can see that paid off. And I think most shows tend to like start an arc and kind of finish it and wrap it up by the end of the 8-episode, 10-episode season. And the show takes its time, and I think it makes every moment feel that much more gratifying, but also makes the way that those thread lines are intertwined together really exciting to see them unfold and to see what really does ultimately usher in that next payoff. So good.
Yes. And we will be here
Yeah.
to just enjoy all of that goodness for season 3 coming up soon.
Yes, so soon, in just a few short couple of weeks. We will definitely be reviewing and discussing, and excited to see what happens next. All right. But in the meantime, this is our review and discussion of The Bear Season 2, Episode 10. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 2. In fact, as we wrapped up our journey through The Bear Season 2, which is wild. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about the season finale, Season 2. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon with more TV and Us, more reviews, more discussions, more awards to give out very soon, as the content arrives on our doorstep soon enough with the next season of The Bear. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk to you again in a few short weeks.